Josephine Whitmore pressed her dead husband's wedding ring against her lips one last time, then dropped it into the dust of a Texas road. 2,000 miles from Boston. 2 years since the cholera took William. And now she stood in the scorching summer heat, watching the man she'd agreed to marry walk away without a single word of greeting. She had sold everything for this moment, every last piece of her old life. He hadn't even looked at her face. If you've ever taken a chance on love and wondered if you'd made the biggest mistake of your life, this story is for you. Subscribe now, stay until the end, and comment your city below. I want to see how far this story travels. The stagecoach wheels groaned to a stop, and Josephine Whitmore gripped the leather seat until her knuckles went white. "Oakwood Crossing, ma'am." The driver's voice cut through the dust. "End of the line." She didn't move. Through the window, heat rose from the dirt street in waves thick enough to taste. August in Texas. She had read about it in William's medical journals back when reading was something she did in a parlor with tea cooling beside her. That was before the cholera swept through Boston's North End. Before she held William's hand while his body emptied itself of everything that made him alive. Before his family's lawyer appeared at her door 3 weeks after the funeral with documents that said the house, the practice, the furniture, none of it had ever been hers. "Ma'am." The driver again. "You getting out?" Josephine pulled the folded newspaper advertisement from her sleeve. The paper had gone soft from handling the ink smeared in places where her fingers had traced the words too many times. "Widower seeks capable wife. Ranch work. No romantic notions required. Send photograph and letter to E. Thornton, Oakwood Crossing, Texas. No romantic notions required." She had laughed when she first read it. Laughed until she cried. Then she wrote the letter anyway. "Ma'am, I got a schedule to keep." Josephine stood. Her legs shook beneath her traveling dress, dove gray the only decent thing she'd kept. She smoothed the fabric and stepped down into the blinding light. The heat hit her like a physical blow. Boston summers were warm. This was something else entirely. The air pressed against her skin, thick and dry, carrying the smell of horse and dust, and something she couldn't name. Something empty. She scanned the street. Weathered storefronts. A water trough where a spotted dog lay panting in the shade. Women in calico moving between buildings with baskets on their arms. Men in wide-brimmed hats who looked at her, then looked away. No one came forward. She had memorized his photograph. Square jaw, dark eyes that gave nothing away. Hair the color of good soil after rain. He had written that he would be waiting. The driver tossed her trunk into the dirt. The latches burst open. Her spare dress spilled out blue cotton practical, the dress of a woman who no longer owned silk. "Lord have mercy!" Josephine crouched to gather her things, stuffing them back with shaking hands. "You the Boston woman!" The voice came from behind her, low, flat, like stones dropping into still water. Josephine turned, still crouched in the dirt with her underthings half visible to anyone who cared to look. He was taller than the photograph suggested, broader in the shoulders. His shirt was faded to a color that might have once been blue, and his hat cast a shadow that hid everything above his mouth. "I'm Josephine Whitmore." She stood clutching her spare dress against her chest. "You must be Thornton." He picked up her trunk. Didn't offer to help her up. Didn't tip his hat. Didn't look at her face. He walked toward a wagon at the end of the street, her trunk under one arm, like it weighed nothing at all. Josephine stood in the settling dust, her hand still half extended toward empty air. A woman passing by gave her a look she recognized. Pity mixed with something harder. "What did you expect?" the look said. "This is Texas." She followed him. The wagon seat was hard wood, no cushion, no shade. Josephine climbed up without assistance and arranged her skirts as best she could. Her trunk sat in the back, beside coils of rope, and a toolbox with rust on the hinges. Eli Thornton, she supposed, she should think of him by his first name, now climbed up beside her. The wagon dipped under his weight. He gathered the reins without speaking. The horses started moving. "It's a long ride," she said. "How far is your ranch?" 4 hours. 4 hours. She kept her voice steady. "That's quite a distance from town." He didn't answer. The wagon rattled over a rut. Josephine grabbed the seat edge to keep from sliding into him. He shifted away, widening the gap between them. She tried again. "Your letter mentioned cattle. How many head do you—" 47. 47. And you manage them alone?" "Yep." The sun beat down. Sweat gathered at Josephine's temples beneath her collar in places she couldn't acknowledge in polite company. She had brought a small hand fan, another remnant of her old life, and used it now, though the air it moved was just as hot as the air it replaced. "Mr. Thornton." He didn't look at her. "Mr. Thornton, I understand this arrangement is unconventional. I'm not expecting romance or courtship or whatever it is that normal marriages begin with, but I had hoped we might at least speak to each other." The muscle in his jaw tightened. His hands adjusted on the reins, knuckles going white, then relaxing. "What do you want me to say?" "Anything. Tell me about the ranch. Tell me what you expect from this arrangement. Tell me why you—" She stopped herself, swallowed the rest of the question. "Tell me why you sent for a wife if you can't even look at her." The wagon rolled on. Dust rose in clouds behind them, marking their passage across the empty land. Finally he spoke. "Ranch house needs work. Roof leaks when it rains, which ain't often enough lately. Drought's been bad. Creek's low. Cattle are restless." He paused. "I need help with the house and the cooking and the things I ain't got time for. That's why I sent the advertisement." "And that's all you want, a housekeeper?" His jaw tightened again. "That's what I said, ain't it?" Josephine turned away. Watched the landscape slide past brown grass-twisted trees that looked half-dead, occasional cattle that lifted their heads to watch the wagon pass. Everything looked thirsty. Everything looked like it was waiting for something that might never come. No romantic notions required. She had thought the words were practical, honest, a refreshing change from the flowery letters other advertisements promised. Now she understood. The words weren't practical. They were a warning. The ranch house appeared as the sun touched the western hills. Small. Weathered boards that had gone gray from years of sun and wind. A porch with one rocking chair. A barn that listed slightly to the left as if it were tired of standing. Eli stopped the wagon, climbed down, lifted her trunk, and carried it toward the house without waiting to see if she followed. Josephine sat on the wagon seat and looked at what she had purchased with the last of her savings. "This is it," she thought. "This is what you chose." A dog emerged from beneath the porch, old gray around the muzzle, moving slow with the stiffness of age. It approached the wagon and looked up at her with eyes that had seen too much. "That's Captain!" Eli's voice came from the porch. "He don't bite." The dog's tail wagged once tentative. Josephine climbed down from the wagon. Her legs nearly buckled. 4 hours on that wooden seat had taken something out of her she hadn't known she had. She steadied herself against the wagon wheel and walked toward the house. Captain followed at her heels close enough that she could feel his warmth against her skirt. The inside was worse than she expected. A cast-iron stove with rust creeping up the legs. A table made of planks that didn't quite fit together. 2 chairs, only 2, though the table could seat 4. A window with no curtains, just bare glass that let in the harsh evening light. Josephine walked through the space slowly. Her boots echoed on the floorboards. Each step raised a small cloud of dust. "Bedroom's there." Eli pointed toward a door. "I'll take the barn." "Mr. Thornton." "Eli." The word came out rough, like he wasn't used to saying it. "Call me Eli." "Eli." She tested the name. It felt strange in her mouth. "You don't have to sleep in the barn. This is your home. I can take the smaller room or—" "Already decided." He moved toward the door, stopped with his hand on the frame. There's flour in the pantry. Eggs in the coop out back. Help yourself." The door closed behind him. Josephine stood alone in the empty room. The silence pressed in from every direction. No traffic noise, no neighbors' voices, no church bells marking the hour. Just the creak of the house settling and the distant sound of cattle lowing. She walked to the window. Through the dusty glass she watched Eli cross the yard toward the barn. His shoulders were tense, his stride quick like he was escaping something. Captain whined softly beside her. "I know," she said to the dog. "I know." She made dinner. Eggs scrambled too dry. Biscuits that came out heavy as stones. She had never been a cook. William's income had paid for a housekeeper who handled such things. Another skill she would need to learn. Eli came in when she set the plate on the table. He sat without speaking, picked up his fork, and ate every bite. "Thank you," he said when the plate was clean. 2 words. Then the scrape of his chair, the clink of his plate in the wash basin, the door opening and closing. Gone. Josephine sat at the table until full dark. The coal oil lamp she had found hissed and flickered, throwing shadows that jumped with every draft that crept through the walls. She should unpack. She should make the bed in the room he had pointed to. She should do something productive instead of sitting here feeling sorry for herself. Instead, she pulled William's photograph from her pocket. He smiled at her from the faded image. Bright eyes, gentle mouth, the look of a man who had never known real hardship. She had loved him. She had loved the life they were building together, and then it had all disappeared as quickly as breath fogging on a cold window. "What would you think of me now?" she whispered to the photograph. "Sitting in a stranger's kitchen in Texas, married to a man who won't even look at me." William didn't answer. He never would again. Josephine tucked the photograph away and stood. The bedroom was small but clean. The bed was narrow, barely wide enough for one person. The mattress was corn husks she discovered when she sat on it, and the blanket was wool that had seen better decades. She unpacked slowly. Her spare dress went on a hook on the wall. Her hairbrush, silver-backed, one of the few things she had kept from her old life, went on the small table beside the bed. The leather-bound volume of poetry she had brought sat beside it, looking as out of place as she felt. Through the thin wall, she could hear nothing from the main room. Through the window, she could see a faint yellow glow in the barn. He was still awake. 20 yards away in the same house she was supposed to share with him, and he might as well have been on the moon. Josephine lay down on the corn husk mattress and stared at the ceiling. The wood was rough-hewn, full of knots and gaps where the evening air crept through. A spider had built a web in one corner, and she watched it work in the lamplight, spinning something beautiful in a place no one would ever appreciate it. "This is my life now," she thought. "This is what I chose." She had chosen it. That was the thing she couldn't escape. No one had forced her onto that stagecoach. No one had made her answer the advertisement. She had done it herself, because the alternative was staying in Boston, with nothing being pitied by people who had once envied her watching William's family enjoy the life that should have been hers. She had thought anything would be better than that. Now she wasn't so sure. Morning came with the smell of coffee. Josephine opened her eyes to pale light filtering through the curtainless window. For a moment she didn't know where she was. The ceiling was wrong. The sounds were wrong. The smell of corn husks instead of feather down. Then she remembered. She dressed quickly. The dove-gray dress was too formal for ranch work, but it was all she had that wasn't wrinkled from the trunk. She smoothed her hair as best she could without a mirror and stepped into the main room. The stove was already warm. A pot of coffee sat on top, steam rising from the spout. The front door stood open, letting in cool morning air that wouldn't last past noon. Eli was gone. She poured herself a cup of coffee and walked to the doorway. The yard stretched out before her, brown and dry, the grass more yellow than green. The barn door was open. Inside she could hear the sounds of work, the clink of metal, the snort of a horse. the rhythmic thud of something being hammered. Captain lay on the porch, chin on his paws. He lifted his head when she appeared, tail wagging once against the weathered boards. "Morning," she said to the dog. He wagged again. Josephine sipped her coffee and watched the sun climb higher. In Boston, mornings had meant newspapers and breakfast trays and the sounds of a city waking up. Here, there was only silence and heat and the distant bawl of cattle somewhere beyond the hill. Movement caught her eye. Eli emerged from the barn, leading a bay mare by the halter. The horse was beautiful, sleek, and strong, with a coat that gleamed even in the harsh light. Eli walked her in circles around the yard, checking her gait, running his hands down her legs. His touch was gentle. Josephine noticed that. The same hands that had barely acknowledged her presence handled the horse with obvious care, fingers testing the tendons, palm smoothing over the muscled neck. The mare nuzzled his shoulder. He reached up and scratched behind her ear, and something in his posture softened, just for a moment. Then he led the horse back into the barn, and the moment was gone. "He's better with animals than people." Josephine startled, spilled coffee over her hand and gasped at the burn. An old woman stood at the edge of the yard. She was small, dark-skinned, with white hair pulled back under a faded kerchief. Her dress was plain cotton, patched at the elbows, and her feet were bare in the dust. "Lord Child, I didn't mean to scare you." The woman came closer, moving with a limp that spoke of old pain. "Let me see that hand." "It's nothing, Let me see." The woman's voice left no room for argument. Josephine held out her hand, and the woman examined the reddened skin with expert eyes. "No blisters, you'll live." She released Josephine's hand and looked up at her face. "You're the Boston woman." "Word travels fast. Ain't much else to do around here except talk." The woman's eyes were sharp, assessing. "I'm Della Mae Hawkins. I live about a mile east, other side of the creek. Eli's the closest thing I got to a neighbor, and he don't even know I exist half the time." Josephine couldn't help the laugh that escaped. "He doesn't seem to know I exist either, and I'm living in his house." Della Mae's expression shifted. Something knowing entered her eyes. "Give him time. That man's got more walls than a fortress and twice as many reasons to keep them up." "What reasons?" The old woman shook her head slowly. "That ain't my story to tell. He'll tell you himself when he's ready, or he won't." She paused. "You cook?" "Badly." "Can you learn?" "I suppose I'll have to." "Then I'll teach you." Della Mae turned and started walking toward the house. "First lesson, coffee should be hot. Yours is getting cold while you're standing there catching flies." Josephine followed her inside. Done. Della Mae stayed most of the morning. She showed Josephine where Eli kept things: the flour in a tin box to keep out weevils, the salt in a jar by the stove, the preserves in the cellar dug beneath the floor. She explained the rhythm of ranch life: early mornings, hard work, early nights. "The heat's the worst of it," Della Mae said, stirring something in a pot that had appeared from her basket. "Summer like this, you work before the sun gets high, rest during the worst of it, work again when it cools. Otherwise you'll drop." "Has it always been this dry?" "Not always, but this year's been bad. Drought started in April and ain't let up since. The creek's lower than I've seen it in 20 years. Della Mae's expression darkened. "And that's causing problems." "What kind of problems?" "Water problems." She didn't elaborate. "You'll find out soon enough." Eli appeared in the doorway. His eyes went to Della Mae, then to Josephine, then back to Della Mae. "Didn't know you were coming by." "Didn't know I needed an invitation." Della Mae wiped her hands on her apron. "I made stew. It's on the stove. Make sure you both eat." She gathered her basket and walked out without another word. Eli stepped aside to let her pass, and Josephine saw something in his face, not quite a smile, but close. The closest she had seen. "She came by to check on me," Josephine said. "Della Mae checks on everybody. It's what she does." Eli moved to the stove, lifted the lid of the pot, inhaled. She's a better cook than me." That's not saying much, apparently. The words came out sharper than she intended. Eli's head turned. For the first time, he looked directly at her face. His eyes were dark brown, almost black, with lines at the corners that spoke of years spent squinting against the sun. Something flickered in them, surprise maybe, or respect. "No," he said. "It ain't." He took a bowl from the shelf, filled it with stew, and sat down at the table. After a moment, Josephine did the same. They ate in silence. But it was different now. Less like a wall, and more like something else. Something she couldn't name. When his bowl was empty, Eli spoke. "Can you ride?" "I learned as a girl. It's been years." "You'll remember." He stood. "Tomorrow, I'll show you the ranch. All of it. If you're going to live here, you should know what you're living with." He walked out before she could respond. Josephine stared at the empty doorway. It wasn't much. A few words, a plan for tomorrow. But it was more than she'd had yesterday. It was a start. That night, she heard it. A sound from the barn. Low and broken. Something between a moan and a cry. Josephine sat up in the darkness. The sound came again, ragged, raw, like an animal in pain. She went to the window. The barn door was closed, but lamplight glowed through the gaps in the boards. The sound continued, wordless and terrible. She pulled on her wrapper and walked outside. The night air was cool after the day's heat, and the stars spread overhead in a sweep so vast it made her dizzy. Her bare feet found the dirt path to the barn. The sounds grew louder as she approached. Now she could hear words mixed with the groaning. Fragments that didn't make sense. "Can't. Please. I'm sorry. I'm sorry." Josephine pushed open the barn door. Eli lay on a pile of hay, still fully clothed, his body twisted in the grip of something that had followed him from sleep. His hands clawed at the air. His face contorted. Sweat darkened his shirt and matted his hair. "No," he gasped. "No, don't make me, please." "Eli." She crossed to him quickly. "Eli, wake up." She touched his shoulder, and he exploded into motion. His hand closed around her wrist, hard enough to bruise. His body jackknifed upward. His eyes flew open, wild and unseeing. For one terrible moment, he didn't know her. His grip tightened. His breath came in ragged gasps. "Eli." She kept her voice steady despite the pain in her wrist. "It's Josephine. You're safe. You're home." Something shifted behind his eyes. Recognition flooded in. He released her wrist like it had burned him. His voice cracked. "I didn't." "It's all right." "Did I hurt you?" "No." The lie came easily. Her wrist throbbed, but he didn't need to know that. "You were dreaming." He sat up, ran both hands through his sweat-soaked hair. His chest heaved like he had run for miles. "You should go back inside." "Eli, go." The word was rough, harsh. "Please." Josephine stood. Her wrist ached where his fingers had dug in. But she didn't leave, not yet. "Whatever happened to you," she said quietly, "it doesn't have to stay in the dark. I know something about loss, about the things that follow you into sleep." He didn't look at her. "You don't know anything about this." "Maybe not." She moved toward the door, stopped. "But I'm here, if you ever want to tell me." She walked back to the house without looking back. Behind her, the barn stayed lit until dawn. The next morning, Eli stood at the corral fence before the sun cleared the hills. He didn't turn when Josephine approached, but his shoulders tightened. "You still want to show me the ranch?" He nodded once. Still didn't look at her. "Eli." She stopped 3 feet away. "About last night. Nothing to talk about." "I think there is." Now he turned. His eyes were bloodshot, rimmed with dark circles that told her he hadn't slept after she left. His jaw was set hard like a man bracing for a blow. I got nightmares, that's all. Lots of men do. His voice was flat. It ain't your concern. I'm your wife. On paper. The words hit harder than she expected. She took a step back. Then she stopped herself, straightened her spine. Fine, show me the ranch. He saddled 2 horses without speaking. The bay mare for himself, a smaller chestnut for her. He held the reins while she mounted, and his hand brushed her ankle when she settled into the saddle. He pulled away like he'd touched fire. They rode north. The land stretched out in every direction, brown and dry, the grass crunching under the horses' hooves. Josephine felt the heat building already pressing down from a sky that held no promise of rain. 47 head, Eli said after a while. Spread across 3 pastures. The north pasture's got the best grass, but it's farthest from water. Where does the water come from? Creek runs through the east side of the property. Spring-fed. Never dried up, not in my lifetime or my father's. He paused. Until this year. Josephine heard something in his voice. Something that went beyond drought. What happens if it dries up completely? Then we're finished. The cattle die. The ranch dies. He looked at her. Everything dies. They crested a low ridge, and Josephine saw the creek below. It was barely a creek anymore, more like a muddy trickle cutting through cracked earth. Cattle stood along its banks, crowded together, pushing for access to what little water remained. It's worse than I thought, Eli said quietly. How much worse? 2 weeks, maybe 3. After that, he didn't finish. They rode along the creek bed for another mile. Josephine noticed stakes driven into the ground on the far bank, marking a line that hadn't been there before. What are those? Eli's expression darkened. Trouble. Before he could explain, hoofbeats sounded behind them. Josephine turned to see 3 riders approaching, fast dust rising in clouds behind them. Eli positioned his horse in front of hers, his hand dropping to the rifle strapped to his saddle. Stay behind me. Who are they? The Canes. The riders pulled up 20 feet away. The man in front was older, maybe 55, with silver hair and a face carved from leather and hard living. His clothes were better than Eli's newer, cleaner, the clothes of a man who had others do his dirty work. Thornton. The man's voice carried the easy authority of someone used to being obeyed. Checking on your little trickle. Luther. Eli's voice was ice. You're on my land. Am I? Luther Kane smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Funny thing about property lines, they can be unclear, especially when nobody's around to dispute them. The lines are clear, have been for 30 years. Things change. Luther's eyes moved to Josephine. Something shifted in his expression. Interest calculation, something that made her skin crawl. I heard you got yourself a wife. All the way from Boston, they say. Josephine lifted her chin. That's right. Must be quite a change. Boston to this. He gestured at the dry land around them. A woman like you used to finer things. How long before you realize you made a mistake? I don't see how that's your concern, Mr. Kane. Luther's smile widened. Oh, I like her. She's got fire. He looked back at Eli. Shame she wasted herself on a man who can't even keep his creek running. One of the riders behind Luther laughed. Younger, with Luther's features softened by youth and something else, cruelty maybe, or just stupidity. His eyes hadn't left Josephine since they arrived. That's my son Samuel, Luther said. Sam, say hello to Mrs. Thornton. Ma'am. Sam touched his hat, but his eyes traveled down her body in a way that made her want to reach for Eli's rifle herself. Welcome to Texas. We're done here. Eli's voice cut like a blade. Get off my land. Luther held up both hands in mock surrender. Just being neighborly, Thornton. No need to get riled. He gathered his reins. But you might want to think about my offer. The drought's only going to get worse, and when that creek dries up completely... He shrugged. Well, A man's got to do what's best for his family, whatever family he's got left. He turned his horse and rode away. Sam lingered a moment longer, his eyes still on Josephine. "See you around, Mrs. Thornton." Then he followed his father, and the three riders disappeared over the ridge. Josephine let out a breath she didn't know she'd been holding. "What offer?" Eli didn't answer immediately. His hands were still tight on the reins, his jaw clenched hard enough to crack teeth. "He wants to buy me out. The ranch, the land, the water rights. Everything. And you said no. I'll die before I sell to Luther Kane." The words hung in the air between them. Josephine heard the weight in them, not just anger, but history. Something old and deep and poisonous. Why? What did he do? Eli's horse shifted beneath him. He stared at the ridge where the Kanes had disappeared. "My father owed him money, years ago during a bad winter. Luther called in the debt at the worst possible time. Pa couldn't pay. Nearly lost everything." He paused. "Ma never recovered from the shame of it. Died blaming herself for not being able to help. That's not... And now Luther wants to finish what he started. Buy up every piece of land in the valley, control all the water, make everyone else dependent on his good graces." Eli's voice went hard. "I won't let him, not while I'm breathing." They rode back to the ranch in silence, but something had changed. The wall between them had cracked just a little, just enough for Josephine to glimpse what lay beneath. The days that followed fell into a rhythm. Josephine woke before dawn, made coffee, started breakfast. She burned things less often now. Della Mae came by twice a week to teach her, and each lesson left her a little more capable, a little more confident. Eli still slept in the barn, still kept his distance during daylight hours. But he talked more now, short sentences, practical information, but words nonetheless. He showed her how to check the chicken coop for eggs, how to pump water from the well, how to read the weather by the way the cattle moved. "Clouds stacking in the west means rain coming," he said one evening. "But clouds moving fast and flat means wind, nothing else." "And what does no clouds at all mean?" "Means we're in trouble." She laughed. He almost smiled. One morning, 2 weeks after her arrival, Josephine walked to the corral and found Eli struggling with a young colt. The animal was wild-eyed ears flat fighting the rope that held it to the fence post. "Need help." "Stay back." Eli's voice was strained. "He's scared. Don't know people yet." Josephine stopped at the fence, watched as Eli approached the colt, slowly, hands open at his sides. The animal snorted and pulled against the rope hooves, throwing up clouds of dust. "Easy," Eli murmured. "Easy now. Ain't nobody gonna hurt you." The colt's ears flicked forward, then back. Its sides heaved with panicked breath. "That's it. That's right. Just breathe." Eli stopped moving, stood perfectly still. The colt circled once, twice the rope tangling around its legs. Then slowly it stopped. Its head dropped. Its body shuddered with one long exhale. Eli reached out. His hand found the colt's neck. The animal flinched, then leaned into the touch. "Good boy. Good boy." His voice was different, soft, patient, full of something Josephine hadn't heard before. She watched his hands move over the colt's trembling neck, calming, soothing, speaking a language that needed no words. "How do you do that?" Eli looked up. For a moment, he seemed to have forgotten she was there. "Do what?" "Make him trust you. He was terrified a minute ago." Eli shrugged. "Animals know when you mean them harm, and they know when you don't. It's people who complicate things." He went back to working with the colt. Josephine stayed at the fence watching, wondering what it would take for him to touch her with that same gentleness. That night, she found flowers on the kitchen table. Wild sage and yellow columbine stems wrapped in wet burlap. Dirt still clung to the roots. No note, no ribbon, just flowers plain and simple. The barn door was already closed. The lamp inside already lit. Josephine crossed to the table, touched one petal with her fingertip. Soft, still cool from whatever shade it had grown in. She found a tin cup, filled it with water, arranged the flowers inside. Clumsy. The stems were too long, the cup too narrow. But she set it on the windowsill where the morning light would find it. Then she sat at the table and pressed her hand against her chest. Her heart beat hard beneath her palm. Maybe the wall was coming down faster than she thought. Sunday came, and with it visitors. Della Mae arrived early with a basket of fresh bread and a warning. Folks are curious about you. They'll come by after church. Be ready. Ready for what? Judgment. The wagons started arriving around noon. Families from the neighboring ranches, people whose names Josephine had only heard mentioned. They brought food pies, casseroles, jars of preserves, and they brought questions poorly disguised as concern. Boston, you say? My, that's a long way. Whatever made you come all the way out here? You must miss the city, all the shops, the theaters, the society. And you've never worked a ranch before. How brave. Josephine smiled until her face ached. Answered politely. Watched the women exchange glances that said more than their words. Don't let them bother you, Della Mae murmured. They're just scared of anything different. Why would they be scared of me? Because you're educated. Because you're from somewhere else. Because you might have ideas about how things should be done. Della Mae's eyes were knowing. Change terrifies people, even people who need it most. Eli stayed by the corral talking with the men. Josephine saw him gesturing toward the north, heard fragments of conversation about water and cattle and the drought that showed no signs of breaking. Then Sam Kane arrived. He rode in alone, dressed in clothes too fine for a Sunday visit to a working ranch. His horse was beautiful, black, high-stepping, expensive. Everything about him shouted money and privilege and the confidence of a man who had never been denied anything. Mrs. Thornton? He dismounted and approached her with a smile that made her skin prickle. I was hoping I'd find you here. Mr. Kane, I didn't expect to see you. Sam, please. He stood too close. His eyes moved over her face with an intensity that felt like touching. I wanted to apologize for my father. He can be direct. It's not always appreciated. Your father made himself very clear. He did, but that doesn't mean I share his methods. Sam lowered his voice. Or his goals. Josephine stepped back. What do you want, Mr. Kane? Just to be friendly. His smile didn't waver. A woman like you stuck out here with a man like Thornton. It must be lonely. I thought maybe you could use a friend. I have friends. Do you? He glanced toward Della Mae, and something ugly flickered across his face. I meant real friends. People who matter. I think you should leave. I'm just being neighborly. She asked you to leave. Eli's voice cut through the air like a whip crack. He stood 10 feet away, his hands at his sides, but there was nothing casual about his posture. Every line of his body spoke of violence barely contained. Sam's smile didn't falter. Thornton, just visiting with your wife. No harm in that. Get on your horse. Get off my land. Or what? The silence stretched. Josephine could feel the tension crackling between them like heat lightning before a storm. Then Sam laughed. Light dismissive, the laugh of a man who knew he held all the cards. Fine, I'll go. He mounted his horse, looked down at Josephine. But think about what I said, Mrs. Thornton. Friends are hard to come by out here, and enemies. He glanced at Eli. Enemies are easy to make. He rode away. The other visitors suddenly found reasons to leave forgotten chores children to tend to early mornings ahead. Within an hour, the yard was empty except for Eli, Josephine, and the lingering smell of trouble. What was that about? Eli's jaw was tight. Sam Kane is his father's son. He wants what his father wants. Which is everything I have. He looked at her. Including you. Josephine felt a chill despite the heat. I'm not his to take. No. Eli's voice was quiet, certain. You're not. That night, Josephine heard the nightmares again. This time, she didn't hesitate. She crossed the yard, barefoot, pushed open the barn door, and found Eli in the grip of whatever demons followed him from sleep. "No," he gasped. "Please. I had to. I had to." She knelt beside him, took his hand, held it tight. "Eli, I'm here. You're safe." His eyes flew open, wild for a moment, then focusing, finding her face in the lamplight. "Josephine, I'm here." His hand gripped hers, hard, desperate, like a drowning man clutching at a rope. "Don't go." "I won't." She stayed, sat beside him in the hay while his breathing slowed and his grip gradually loosened. The lamp burned low. The horses shifted in their stalls. Somewhere outside, Captain barked once at shadows. "The war," Eli said finally. His voice was raw. "I was at Gettysburg, Cemetery Ridge." Josephine didn't speak, just held his hand. "I killed men, lots of men, but that's not what follows me." He closed his eyes. There was a boy. Couldn't have been more than 17. He was gut-shot, dying slow, crying for his mother. His voice broke. "I ended it. I put my pistol to his head and I ended it. Because I couldn't. I couldn't let him suffer like that." Tears tracked down his face. He didn't wipe them away. His eyes. God help me, his eyes. He looked at me like I was saving him. And I pulled the trigger. Josephine brought his hand to her lips, pressed a kiss against his knuckles. "You gave him mercy. I gave him death. Sometimes that's the same thing." He turned his face toward her. In the dim light, she could see the boy he had been beneath the man he had become. Broken, lost, still looking for forgiveness he couldn't grant himself. "Why did you come here?" he whispered. "Why did you answer my advertisement?" "Because I was broken too." She didn't look away. "Because I thought maybe two broken people could help each other heal." His free hand rose, touched her face. His fingers trembled against her cheek. "Can they?" "I don't know." She leaned into his touch. "But I'd like to find out." He pulled her close, wrapped his arms around her, held on like she was the only solid thing in a world that had never stopped spinning. They stayed that way until dawn. Something changed after that night in the barn. Eli still slept there, but he left the door open now. And in the mornings when Josephine brought him coffee, he didn't turn away. He looked at her, really looked, like he was seeing her for the first time. "You stayed," he said on the third morning. "I told you I would. Most people don't keep their word. I'm not most people." He took the coffee. Their fingers touched. He didn't pull away. The drought grew worse. The creek that had been a trickle became patches of mud separated by cracked earth. Cattle crowded around the remaining pools, fighting for space, bawling with a desperation that kept Josephine awake at night. "How much longer?" she asked. "Days. Maybe a week." Eli's face was grim. "After that, we start losing them." The first neighbor came on a Tuesday. Tom Hendricks rode up just after dawn, hat in his hands, pride in tatters. His ranch bordered Eli's to the south, and Josephine had met his wife at the Sunday gathering, a quiet woman with tired eyes and too many children. "I know I got no right to ask," Tom said, "but my well went dry yesterday. The kids—" He stopped, swallowed hard. "I got 6 kids, Thornton. The youngest ain't but 2 years old." Eli didn't hesitate. "Take what you need. I can pay. Not much, but don't want your money." Eli jerked his head toward the creek. "Fill your barrels. Come back when you need more." Tom's eyes went wet. He blinked hard, looked away. "I won't forget this." "Nothing to forget. It's just water." But it wasn't just water. Josephine understood that now. In this land, in this drought, water was everything. Life and death measured in buckets and barrels. More neighbors came, the Pattersons from the west, Old Man Greer from the north, the Martinez family who spoke broken English, but whose gratitude needed no translation. Eli turned none of them away. "You're going to run out," Josephine said after the fourth family left. "If you keep giving it away, then I run out. And then what? What happens to us?" Eli looked at her. Something shifted in his expression. Surprise maybe at the word us. "We figure it out, together." Word traveled fast. By the end of the week, half the valley knew that Eli Thornton was sharing his water while their own wells went dry. And Luther Kane knew too. He came on a Saturday afternoon with 6 men at his back. Josephine was in the yard when they arrived feeding the chickens from a bucket balanced on her hip. She heard the hoofbeats before she saw them, too many horses moving too fast. "Eli!" He emerged from the barn with a shovel in his hands. His eyes went to the riders, counted them, calculated the odds. 6-1. 7 if you counted Luther. "Get inside," he said to Josephine. "No." "Josephine." "I said no." Luther pulled up at the edge of the yard. His horse danced beneath him, sensing the tension. The men behind him spread out in a loose semicircle, blocking any escape. "Thornton." Luther's voice was pleasant, conversational, the voice of a man holding all the cards. "Heard you've been playing charity with your water." "My water, my choice." "Is it?" Luther smiled. "See, I've been doing some thinking. That spring that feeds your creek, it starts up in the hills, on land that used to belong to the territorial government." "Used to?" "Things change. Papers get filed. Claims get made." Luther pulled a folded document from his coat. "As of yesterday, I own the mineral rights to everything upstream of your property line, including the spring." Josephine's blood went cold. "That's not possible." "Oh, it's very possible, Mrs. Thornton. Amazing what money can buy." Luther tucked the paper away. "Now I'm a reasonable man. I don't want to cut off your water entirely. That would be cruel. But I do think some compensation is in order." "What do you want?" "The same thing I've always wanted. Your land, your cattle, everything." Luther's smile widened. "Fair price, generous even. Enough to start over somewhere else. And if I refuse, then I dam the spring, your creek goes dry, your cattle die." He shrugged. "Your choice." Eli's grip tightened on the shovel. The muscles in his arms stood out like ropes. Josephine could feel the violence coiling inside him, the rage that had nowhere to go. "You'd let people die over a land grab." "People die all the time, Thornton. It's the way of the world. The strong survive, the weak." Another shrug. "Well, get off my property. I'll give you a week to think about it. After that..." Luther gathered his reins. "The offer decreases, significantly." He turned his horse. The men followed, but Sam lingered his eyes, finding Josephine with that same hungry look that made her stomach turn. "Think about it, Mrs. Thornton. When everything falls apart, and it will, you'll need somewhere to go. Someone to take you in." He smiled. "I can be very accommodating." "I'd rather die." Sam's smile didn't waver. "That can be arranged too." He rode away. Josephine stood in the yard, her hands shaking so badly she dropped the chicken bucket. Feed scattered across the dirt. She didn't move to pick it up. Eli. He was already walking toward the barn, the shovel still gripped in his white-knuckled hands. "Eli, wait!" He didn't stop. She ran after him, caught his arm, felt the tension thrumming through his body, like a wire pulled too tight. "What are you going to do?" "I don't know." "Eli, I said I don't know." He spun to face her, and she saw something in his eyes she'd never seen before. Fear. Real, raw, terrifying fear. "I can't fight him. He's got money. He's got men. He's got lawyers and politicians in his pocket. What have I got?" "You've got the truth." "The truth?" He laughed, but there was no humor in it. "The truth don't mean nothing out here. Justice belongs to whoever can afford it." Then we find another way. There is no other way. His voice cracked. Don't you understand he's won? He's always going to win. Men like him always win. And men like me. He stopped, looked away. Men like me just lose slower. Josephine grabbed his face with both hands, forced him to look at her. Listen to me. I didn't come 2,000 miles to watch you give up. I didn't leave everything I knew to marry a man who folds the first time things get hard. You don't understand. I understand perfectly. You're scared, so am I. But being scared doesn't mean being beaten. Her voice was fierce. We fight. We find a way. Together. That's what you said, isn't it, together? His eyes searched her face, looking for something. Hope, maybe, or belief. What if we can't win? Then we lose together. But at least we'll know we tried. For a long moment, neither of them moved. Then Eli's hands came up to cover hers. His forehead dropped against hers. She felt his breath warm on her face. How did you get so strong? I've had practice at starting over. That night, Della Mae came with news. There's a lawyer in town, she said. Name's Howard. He helped the Martinez family when they had trouble with their deed. He's honest, which is rare. And he don't scare easy, which is rarer. Can he help us? Maybe. But you'll have to go to him. He won't come out here not with Cain's men watching the roads. Eli shook his head. I can't leave the ranch. Not with Luther looking for any excuse to, I'll go. Both of them turned to Josephine. I know how to talk to lawyers. I know how to read documents, find loopholes, ask the right questions. She lifted her chin. Let me do this. It's not safe. Nothing is safe anymore. But this is something I can actually help with. She met his eyes. Let me help. Eli was quiet for a long time. Then he nodded. Take the buckboard. Stay on the main road. And for God's sake, be careful. She left at dawn. The ride to town took 3 hours. Josephine kept the horses moving steady, watching the landscape for any sign of riders. The road was empty, but that didn't ease the tension knotted in her chest. Oakwood Crossing looked different in the morning light. Smaller somehow, more fragile. A collection of wooden buildings clinging to existence in the middle of nowhere. She found the lawyer's office above the general store. The stairs creaked under her feet. The door was unlocked. Mr. Howard? The man behind the desk looked up. Older, maybe 60, with spectacles perched on his nose and ink stains on his fingers. His eyes were sharp despite his age. Mrs. Thornton, I presume. How did you know? Not many Boston accents in these parts. He gestured to the chair across from him. Sit. Tell me what Luther Cain has done now. She told him everything. The threats, the water rights, the document Luther had waved in front of them. Howard listened without interrupting his pen-scratching notes on a piece of paper. May I see the document? He didn't leave it with us. Of course he didn't. Howard set down his pen. Here's what I can tell you. Mineral rights and water rights are two different things under territorial law. Even if Luther owns the mineral rights to the upstream land, that doesn't necessarily give him the right to dam a natural spring that feeds established agricultural properties downstream. So we have a case. Potentially. But it would have to go before a judge, and the nearest circuit judge won't be through for another 6 weeks. And in the meantime... He spread his hands. Luther knows that. He's counting on the drought forcing your husband's hand before any legal remedy can be applied. There has to be something else, something faster. There might be. Howard leaned forward. The Territorial Land Office keeps records of all claims filed in the region. If Luther's documentation has any irregularities, if he bribed the wrong official, or filed incorrect paperwork that could invalidate his claim entirely. Where is the land office? Fort Davis, 3 days' ride. 3 days. Josephine's heart sank. But, Howard continued, I have a contact there, a clerk who owes me a favor. I can send a telegram today requesting copies of all documents related to Luther's recent filings. How long will that take? A week. Maybe less if we're lucky. A week. 7 days. It might as well have been a lifetime. Do it, Josephine said. Whatever it costs. She left the lawyer's office with a sliver of hope and a growing sense of dread. The main street was busier now, people moving between shops, horses tied to hitching posts. Normal life continuing while her world teetered on the edge of collapse. She was halfway to the buckboard when a hand closed around her arm. Mrs. Thornton. Sam Kane's face was inches from hers. His breath smelled of whiskey, his grip hard enough to bruise. Let go of me. Now that's not very friendly. He pulled her toward the narrow alley between the general store and the blacksmith shop. We should talk. Get to know each other better. I said let go. She tried to pull free. His grip tightened. Pain shot up her arm. You think you're better than me? His voice went ugly. You think that dirt farmer is better than me? My father owns this town. He owns the law, the land, everything. And soon, he'll own your precious husband's ranch too. He'll never sell. He won't have a choice. Sam's free hand grabbed her chin, forcing her face up. And neither will you. When everything falls apart, I'll be there, waiting. And you'll come to me because there won't be anywhere else to go. I'd rather starve. Sam's eyes went cold. That can be arranged. Remove your hands from that woman. The voice came from behind them, low and steady and sharp as a blade. Sam turned. Della May stood at the mouth of the alley, a wooden cane in her hands and murder in her eyes. Mind your business, old woman. She is my business. Della May stepped closer. Now let her go before I forget I'm supposed to be a Christian. Sam laughed. What are you going to do? Beat me with your walking stick? If I have to. You don't scare me. You're just a... Della May moved faster than her age suggested possible. The cane whipped through the air and cracked against Sam's knee. He yelped and released Josephine, staggering backward. You crazy! Run along now, boy. Della May's voice was ice. Before I aim higher. Sam's face twisted with rage. For a moment, Josephine thought he would attack. Then he looked around, saw people stopping to watch, calculated the cost of a public scene. This isn't over, he spat. It never is with your kind. He limped away, throwing one last venomous look over his shoulder. Josephine sagged against the wall, her legs suddenly unable to hold her. Are you hurt? I'm fine. She wasn't fine. Her arm throbbed, her heart raced. Tears pressed behind her eyes. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. Della May took her arm gently, so gently, and guided her toward the buckboard. We need to get you home, and we need to tell Eli what happened. No. Child, if I tell him, he'll go after Sam. He'll get himself killed or arrested or worse. Josephine wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. I won't let that happen. So you'll just pretend nothing happened. I'll handle it. She climbed onto the buckboard, took the reins. I have to. Della May looked at her for a long moment. Then she nodded slowly. You're stronger than you know, Josephine Whitmore. But strength ain't the same as invincibility. Remember that. The ride home took forever. Josephine kept seeing Sam's face, feeling his hands on her, hearing his words echo in her head. When everything falls apart, I'll be there. She pulled up to the ranch as the sun was setting. Eli came out of the barn relief, flooding his face when he saw her. Thank God. I was starting to worry. I'm fine. The lawyer thinks he can help. She climbed down from the buckboard, keeping her bruised arm turned away from him. It'll take time, but there might be a way. What kind of way? The legal kind. She forced a smile. Let me take care of the horses. You look exhausted. Josie. I'm fine, really. She led the horses toward the barn before he could ask more questions. Inside in the shadows, she finally let herself shake. Handle it, she told herself. You have to handle it. But as she unbuckled the harnesses with trembling hands, she couldn't help wondering how much more handling could she take. The week that followed was the longest of Josephine's life. Every day, Eli rode out to check the cattle. Every day, he came back with grimmer news. The creek was nearly dry. The animals were suffering. Without rain soon, they would start losing them. And every night, Josephine lay awake waiting for the telegram that would either save them or seal their fate. It came on a Friday. Delamay brought it herself, her face unreadable as she handed over the yellow paper. Josephine's hands shook as she unfolded it. Irregularities found in Kane filing. Stop. Witness signatures appear forged. Stop. Investigation pending. Stop. Hold position. Stop. Howard. What does it say? She looked up at Eli, felt the first real smile in days spreading across her face. It says we have a chance. The telegram changed everything and nothing. Luther Kane didn't know yet. The investigation was still pending, the evidence still being gathered, the wheels of justice turning slower than the dying creek. But for the first time since this nightmare began, Josephine could breathe. How long until they make it official? Eli asked. Howard said weeks, maybe a month. We don't have a month. I know. She folded the telegram carefully, tucked it into her pocket. But now Luther has something to lose too. If we can hold on long enough. If. Eli's voice was bitter. That's a mighty big if. The answer came 3 nights later. Josephine woke to Captain barking. Not his usual bark, the lazy, half-hearted sound he made at passing rabbits. This was different. Frantic. Desperate. The bark of a dog who smelled something wrong. She was out of bed before she fully woke, pulling on her wrapper, stumbling toward the window. And then she saw it. Fire. The barn was burning. Eli! She ran outside. The heat hit her like a wall, pushing her back. Flames climbed the wooden walls, hungry and fast, reaching toward the black sky with orange fingers. Smoke billowed in thick clouds that stung her eyes and filled her lungs. Eli. He emerged from the inferno leading the bay mare. The horse's eyes rolled white with terror. Her coat singed her hooves, dancing on the packed earth. Behind them, the other horses screamed. Get back! Eli shoved the mare's reins into her hands. Get her away from the fire. The other horses. I'm going back. Eli knowed. But he was already running toward the flames. Josephine watched him disappear into the smoke, her heart stopping in her chest. 1 second, 2, 3, an eternity. Then he emerged again, leading the chestnut mare and the old draft horse, both wild with fear. His shirt was smoking. His face was black with soot. He stumbled and fell to his knees, coughing so hard his whole body shook. Josephine ran to him. Are you hurt, Eli? Are you hurt? I'm fine. He wasn't fine. His voice was raw, barely audible over the roar of the fire. Captain, where's Captain? He was just here, he was... A howl cut through the night, high and thin and full of pain. No. Eli was on his feet before Josephine could stop him. No, no, no. He found the dog behind the barn. Captain had gotten too close to the flames, his old legs too slow to carry him to safety. His fur was burned. His body was still. Eli dropped to his knees beside him. Captain? Hey, boy. Hey, you're okay. You're gonna be okay. The dog's tail moved once, weak, barely there. That's right, good boy, such a good boy. Josephine knelt beside them. Captain's breathing was labored, each inhale a struggle. His eyes found Eli's face and stayed there. He's not going to make it, Josephine whispered. Don't say that. Eli. I said don't say that. His voice cracked. He's been with me since the war. He's all I had left. He's... Captain's tail moved again. His head turned just slightly, pressing into Eli's hand. Then his eyes closed. His body relaxed. And the breathing stopped. Eli stayed frozen for a long moment, his hand still resting on the dog's neck, his shoulders shaking with silent sobs. I'm sorry, Josephine said. "I'm so sorry. He did this." Eli's voice was barely human. "Cain did this." "We don't know." "We know." He stood. His eyes were red, but not from the smoke. "We know exactly who did this." "Eli, wait. We can't prove—" "I don't need proof." He started walking toward the house. "I need a gun." Josephine ran after him, grabbed his arm. He tried to shake her off, but she held on. "Listen to me. If you go after him now, you'll be the one who ends up in jail. Or dead. That's what he wants. Don't you see? He wants you to do something stupid so he can claim self-defense. Then he can claim whatever he wants. And what happens to me?" She stepped in front of him, blocking his path. "What happens to this ranch, to everything we've been fighting for? You think I came all this way to watch you throw it away? Josie. No, you don't get to give up. Not now. Not like this." Her hands gripped his arms hard enough to leave marks. "We do this the right way. We expose him for what he is. We make him pay legally, publicly, where everyone can see. And if that doesn't work, then we figure out something else. Together." She met his eyes. "But you don't get to leave me. Not for revenge. Not for anything." Eli's jaw worked. His whole body trembled with the effort of holding himself back. Behind them, the barn collapsed in a shower of sparks and groaning timber. Finally, he exhaled. "Okay. Okay. Okay, we do it your way." His voice was rough. "But if it doesn't work, it will work." "If it doesn't," he repeated, "then I finish this. My way. And you don't try to stop me." Josephine swallowed hard. Deal. They buried Captain at dawn, under the cottonwood tree beside the graves of Eli's parents. Josephine dug alongside him, her hands blistering on the shovel handle, her body aching from the long night. "He saved my life," Eli said when they finished. "At Gettysburg. A Confederate soldier had his bayonet at my throat, and Captain came out of nowhere. Bit the man's arm clean through. He was a good dog. He was the best." Eli's voice broke. "The absolute best." He didn't cry again, but something in his face had changed, hardened. The man who had been slowly opening up over the past weeks was gone, replaced by someone colder, someone who had lost too much to feel anything but rage. Josephine recognized that look. She had seen it in her own mirror the weeks after William died. The news spread fast. By noon, half the valley knew about the fire. By evening, they were choosing sides. "It's obvious who did it," Tom Hendricks said. He stood in what was left of Eli's yard, surrounded by a handful of other ranchers. "Cain's been threatening you for weeks." "Obvious ain't the same as provable," Old Man Greer muttered. "Luther's got the sheriff in his pocket. We go accusing without evidence, we'll be the ones in trouble. So we do nothing. Let him burn us all out one by one. I'm just saying we need to be careful." "Careful!" Tom's voice rose. "My kids are drinking water from your creek because of Eli's generosity. If Cain gets away with this, how long before he comes for the rest of us?" The argument continued. Josephine stood on the porch watching, listening. The community was splitting down the middle, those who wanted to fight and those who were too scared to try. Della Mae appeared beside her. "This is what Luther wants, you know. Division, fear. Easier to pick us off when we're too busy fighting each other. How do we stop it? Someone has to stand up. Someone has to say what everyone's thinking but afraid to speak." "Eli." Della Mae shook her head slowly. "Eli's got too much anger in him right now. Anger don't convince people. It scares them." She looked at Josephine. "But you're different. You're from outside. You don't have the same history, the same grudges." "What are you saying?" "I'm saying maybe it's time for that Boston education to do some good." That night, Josephine couldn't sleep. She lay on the corn husk mattress, staring at the ceiling, listening to the silence where Captain's breathing should have been. Outside, Eli paced the yard. She could hear his boots on the packed earth back and forth, back and forth. She thought about William, about the way he used to speak at medical conferences, commanding rooms full of skeptical doctors, with nothing but the truth and his absolute belief in it. She had watched him change minds, shift opinions, turn enemies into allies. The key, he had told her once, is to make them feel like the idea was theirs all along. She rose before dawn, dressed in her best dress, the dove gray one mended now, but still presentable, pinned her hair up the way her mother had taught her the way a lady was supposed to look when addressing important matters. Eli was still in the yard. His eyes were hollow, his face gray with exhaustion. "What are you doing?" "Getting ready." "For what?" "Church." "Church." He stared at her. "The barn is ashes, my dog is dead, and you want to go to church. Not to pray." She adjusted her collar. "To fight." Sunday service was held at the Fenton place in a barn big enough to hold the whole community. Reverend Thomas Whitfield presided, a quiet man with kind eyes and a past he didn't discuss. Josephine arrived with Eli just as the service was ending. She waited while the Reverend gave the final blessing, while people stood and stretched, and began the slow shuffle toward the door. Then she walked to the front of the room. "Excuse me?" The shuffling stopped. Heads turned. "I know this isn't the usual way of things." Her voice carried clearly through the barn. "But I have something to say, and I'm asking you to hear me out." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. The Reverend raised his eyebrows but didn't object. "Most of you know me as Eli Thornton's wife, the Boston woman who answered an advertisement in a newspaper and came west looking for something different." She paused. "What you might not know is why I came." Silence. Every eye fixed on her face. 2 years ago, I lost my husband to cholera. 3 weeks after his funeral, I lost everything else: my home, my security, my place in the world. The law said I had no rights to anything we had built together. The law said I was nothing. She saw women in the crowd nodding. They knew. They had lived it too. "I came here because I had nowhere else to go. I married a man I had never met because it was that or starve. And I found something I never expected." Her eyes found Eli standing at the back of the barn. He was watching her with an expression she couldn't read. "I found a man who shares his water with neighbors when his own creek is running dry. A man who turns away no one who comes asking for help. A man who would rather lose everything than compromise who he is." "Now wait just a minute." The voice came from the right side of the barn. Luther Kane stood up, his face red, his jaw tight. "This woman is trying to turn you all against me. She's lying, manipulating." "I haven't said your name, Mr. Kane." Josephine's voice was calm. "Why do you assume I'm talking about you?" Scattered laughter. Luther's face went redder. 3 nights ago, someone burned our barn to the ground. Eli's dog died in that fire, a dog that saved his life in the war that had been with him for 15 years. She let that sink in. "We don't know for certain who did it, but we know who's been threatening us. We know who wants our land badly enough to forge documents to get it." "That's a damned lie." "Is it?" Josephine pulled the telegram from her pocket. "I have here a message from the Territorial Land Office. It says, and I quote, 'Irregularities found in Kane filing. Witness signatures appear forged. Investigation pending.'" The murmurs became a roar. Luther's face went from red to white. "You can't prove anything." "I don't have to prove it, Mr. Kane. The territorial authorities will do that for me. All I have to do is wait." "This is outrageous. I won't stand here and—" "Then sit down." The voice came from the back of the barn. Sam Kane stepped forward, his face pale, his hands shaking. "Sit down, Father." The barn went absolutely silent. "Sam, what are you?" "I know what you did." Sam's voice cracked. "I know you hired Jake Wheeler to set that fire. I know you forged those documents. I know you've been lying and cheating and stealing for years. You don't know what you're talking about. I found the letters, Father, in your study. The ones from the forger in San Antonio. The ones that detail exactly how much you paid and exactly what you wanted him to write. Luther's face twisted. You went through my private papers. I went through them because I couldn't believe my own father would burn a man's barn with animals inside. I couldn't believe you would kill an innocent dog just to force someone off their land. Sam's voice broke. I was wrong. Everything I've done for you, for this family, for... No. Sam shook his head. You did it for yourself, for your pride, for your need to be the biggest, the richest, the most powerful man in the valley, and you didn't care who you hurt to get there. Father and son stared at each other across the crowded barn. Josephine could feel the weight of the moment, everything changing, everything shifting. Sam, listen to me. I'm done listening. Sam turned to the Reverend. I'll testify. To the sheriff, to the territorial authorities, to anyone who asks. I'll tell them everything I know. Luther's face crumpled. For one moment, Josephine almost felt sorry for him. Almost. You would betray your own father. You betrayed everything you taught me to believe in. Sam's voice was quiet now, full of a grief that went beyond words. You taught me that a man's word is his bond, that integrity matters more than money, that we take care of our neighbors, not destroy them. I was trying to build something. You were trying to own something. There's a difference. Sam walked toward the barn door, stopped, looked back one last time. I loved you, Father. I looked up to you. And you made me ashamed to carry your name. He walked out. The silence he left behind was deafening. The aftermath was chaos. Luther Kane left the church surrounded by people who had once respected him, now watching with new eyes. His shoulders were hunched, his stride uncertain, the walk of a man whose world had just collapsed. The sheriff was sent for. Statements were taken. The evidence Sam provided was damning letters, receipts, a paper trail that led directly to Luther's door. It's over, Della May said, watching the Kane wagon disappear down the road. He'll face charges. The land claim will be voided. What about Sam? Josephine asked. Sam made his choice. It took courage what he did. More courage than most men show in a lifetime. That evening, Eli found Josephine at Captain's grave. You did it, he said quietly. You actually did it. We did it. All of us. No. He stood beside her, looking down at the freshly turned earth. That was you in there. That speech, that fire. I couldn't have done that. You didn't have to. That's what partners are for. He turned to look at her. The hardness that had been in his face since the fire was still there, but something else was showing through now. Something softer. Something like hope. Partners. Isn't that what we are? He was quiet for a long moment. Then he reached out and took her hand. I think, he said slowly, we might be something more than that. His fingers tightened around hers. Rough, warm, real. Josie, I ain't good at this, at saying what I feel, but watching you up there today standing up against Luther fighting for us. He swallowed hard. I think I might be falling in love with you. Her heart stopped. Started again. Beat so hard she could feel it in her throat. Might be. Am. His voice was rough. I am. Falling in love with you. Already fell, maybe. I don't know when it happened, but it did, and now I can't imagine this place without you in it. Josephine reached up, touched his face, felt the stubble rough against her palm, the heat of his skin, the slight tremor that ran through him at her touch. I came here expecting nothing, she said softly. I came here prepared to spend my life with a stranger who didn't want me. And instead, I found... what? Home. She rose on her toes, pressed her lips against his. I found home. He kissed her back. Gentle at first, uncertain like a man who had forgotten how. Then deeper, more urgent years of loneliness and loss pouring out between them. When they finally pulled apart, both of them were breathing hard. We should probably go inside, Josephine whispered. Probably. Neither of them moved. Eli. Yeah, I love you too. His arms tightened around her, his face buried in her hair. And for the first time since she'd arrived in Texas, Josephine felt like everything was going to be okay. The rain came that night. Josephine woke to the sound of thunder, to the smell of water hitting dry earth, to the miracle they had prayed for finally arriving. She ran to the window and pressed her palm against the glass, watching the drops streak down like tears of joy. Eli. He was already awake, already standing at the door, face turned up to the sky, letting the rain wash over him. "It's raining," he said, his voice full of wonder. "Josie, it's really raining." She ran to him. He caught her, lifted her, spun her around in the downpour. They were both soaked in seconds, both laughing like children, both alive in a way they hadn't been in weeks. "It's over," she said. "The drought, Luther, all of it. It's finally over." He set her down, cupped her face in his hands. Rain ran down his cheeks like tears. "No," he said. "It's not over. It's just beginning." And then he kissed her again there in the rain, in the place they had saved, in the home they had built together. The rain fell for 3 days. Josephine stood at the window each morning watching the creek rise, watching the brown earth turn green at the edges, watching the miracle unfold one drop at a time. The cattle no longer crowded the muddy banks. They spread across the pastures, grazing on grass that seemed to grow overnight. "It's like the land was just waiting," she said. Eli came up behind her, wrapped his arms around her waist. "It does that sometimes. Holds its breath until it can't anymore. Then it lets go all at once." "Sounds like someone else I know." He pressed his lips to her hair. "Maybe." On the 4th day, the wagons started arriving. Tom Hendricks came first, his wagon loaded with lumber. Behind him came the Pattersons, the Greers, the Martinez family, more wagons than Josephine could count. They rolled up the muddy track in a slow procession, wheels cutting fresh ruts in the soft earth. "What is this?" "Barn raising," Eli said. His voice was rough. "They're here to rebuild what Luther destroyed." Josephine's throat tightened. "All of them. All of them." Martha Holloway climbed down from her wagon with the energy of a woman half her age. She marched across the yard and grabbed Josephine's hands. "Don't you dare cry," Martha said, though her own eyes were wet. "We got work to do." The men unloaded lumber, while the women set up tables for food. Josephine tried to help, but Martha pushed her toward the center of the activity. "You stand right there and watch. This is what community looks like. This is what you fought for." By noon, the frame of a new barn stood where the old one had burned. Fresh pine glowed golden in the summer sun, rising from the ashes like a promise. Eli worked alongside the other men, his hammer striking nails in steady rhythm, his face transformed by something Josephine had never seen there before. Joy. "He's smiling," she said to Delamay. "First time in years, I reckon." Delamay's voice was soft. "You did that. We all did." "No child." The old woman shook her head. "He started healing the day you arrived. He just didn't know it yet." The work continued through the afternoon. Stories were shared, jokes were told, laughter rang out across the yard. Josephine moved among the workers, refilling water cups, bringing food to hungry hands, feeling for the first time like she truly belonged. "Mrs. Thornton." She turned. Sam Kane stood at the edge of the yard, hat in his hands, uncertainty written across his face. "Sam." "I didn't know if I should come." He shifted his weight. "After everything my father did, I figured maybe I wasn't welcome." Josephine looked at him, really looked. The arrogance she had seen before was gone, replaced by something smaller, something ashamed. He was just a young man who had lost his father, lost his family name, lost everything he thought he knew. "What you did took courage," she said. "It took more than courage. It took honor." I should have done it sooner. You did it when it mattered. She gestured toward the rising barn. That's what counts. Sam's eyes went to the workers, to the community that had rejected his father and embraced his enemy. They don't want me here. They don't know you yet, not the real you. She paused. But they could, if you gave them a chance. He stood there for a long moment, wrestling with something she couldn't see. Then he set his hat on his head, rolled up his sleeves, and walked toward the lumber pile. Anyone need help? Silence. The men looked at each other, uncertain. Tom Hendricks was the first to move. He picked up a hammer, walked over to Sam, and pressed it into his hands. You know how to swing one of these? I can learn. Then get to work. Sam took his place among the men. And just like that, the past began to release its grip. Evening came, and with it the final beam. The barn stood complete, 4 walls, a solid roof, doors that swung smooth on new hinges. It smelled of fresh-cut pine and possibility. The crowd gathered as Eli climbed down from the ladder, sawdust in his hair, exhaustion in his eyes, gratitude in every line of his face. I don't know what to say. His voice cracked. I've never been much for words. You all know that. Laughter rippled through the crowd. But this... He gestured at the barn, at the people who had built it. This is more than I deserve, more than I ever expected. It's what neighbors do, Tom said. No. Eli shook his head. It's what family does, and that's what you are. All of you. You're my family. His eyes found Josephine in the crowd. Something passed between them, understanding, commitment, love. And so is she. Josephine's heart stopped. She came here a stranger, a city woman with no business being on a ranch in the middle of nowhere. I was too stubborn and too scared to see what was right in front of me. He walked toward her, the crowd parting to let him through. But she didn't give up on me. She stood by me when everything was falling apart. She fought for me when I was ready to quit. He stopped in front of her, took her hands. Josephine Whitmore, I married you on paper because I needed help on a ranch. I'm asking you now to marry me for real. Because I need you. Not just your help. You. The yard went absolutely silent. Will you have me stubborn, broken, terrible with words as I am? Josephine couldn't speak. Tears streamed down her face, but she was smiling, laughing, crying all at once. Yes, she managed. Yes, 1,000 times yes. Eli pulled her into his arms. The crowd erupted in cheers, in whistles, in the joyful noise of a community witnessing something beautiful. Kiss her, someone shouted. So he did. The celebration lasted well into the night. Someone produced a fiddle. Someone else brought out a jug of something that burned on the way down and warmed the blood. People danced in the yard, their shadows long in the lamplight. Josephine found herself pulled into dance after dance with Tom Hendricks, with Old Man Greer, even with Reverend Whitfield, who moved with surprising grace for a man of his years. You've changed things here, the Reverend said as they waltzed across the packed earth. You know that, don't you? I didn't do anything special. You showed up, you stayed, you fought. He smiled gently. Sometimes that's the most special thing of all. When the music finally stopped and the last wagon rolled away, Josephine stood alone with Eli in the yard. The new barn rose behind them, solid and real. The stars spread overhead like salt on a dark tablecloth. Married for real, she said. What exactly does that mean? Eli's arms went around her. It means no more sleeping in the barn. Is that all? It means I don't want to spend another night without you beside me. It means I want to wake up every morning knowing you're there. It means... He paused, struggling for words. It means you're mine, and I'm yours, and nothing's ever going to change that. Nothing. Nothing. She leaned into him, felt the steady beat of his heart against her cheek. I can live with that. The weeks that followed were the happiest of Josephine's life. Eli moved his things from the barn to the house, Not that he had many things, just a change of clothes and his father's Bible, and a tintype photograph of his parents on their wedding day. She hung the photograph on the wall beside the bed where they could both see it. "They would have liked you," he said, staring at the image. "Ma, especially. She always said I needed someone who could stand up to me. And your father?" Pa would have been suspicious at first. He didn't trust outsiders. A small smile. "But you would have won him over. You win everyone over." "Not everyone. Everyone who matters." The ranch began to heal along with them. The creek ran clear and cold, fuller than it had been in months. The cattle grew fat on fresh grass. Even the old draft horse seemed younger, prancing in the corral like a colt. But some wounds took longer to close. Josephine woke one night to find the bed empty beside her. She found Eli on the porch, staring at the cottonwood tree where Captain was buried. "The dreams again?" He nodded. Didn't speak. She sat beside him, took his hand, waited. "It's getting better," he said finally. "Not gone, but better. Della Mae gave me some tea. Says it helps with the night terrors." "Does it?" "Some." He turned to look at her. "You help more." "How?" "I don't know. Just knowing you're there. Knowing I'm not alone anymore." He squeezed her hand. "For so long I thought being alone was the only way to survive. Keep everyone at a distance. Don't let anyone in. Don't give them the chance to leave. And now I know that was just fear talking. Fear of losing people the way I lost my parents. The way I lost Captain." His voice dropped. "The way I almost lost myself in that war. You're still here. Because of you." He lifted her hand to his lips. "Because you saw something in me worth saving. I saw you, Eli. That's all. I just saw you." They sat together until dawn, watching the stars fade and the sky turn pink at the edges. When the sun finally cleared the horizon, Eli stood and pulled her to her feet. "Come on, there's something I want to show you." He led her to the edge of the north pasture to a spot where the land rose slightly before dropping away into a gentle valley. From here you could see the whole ranch, the house, the new barn, the creek winding through the green fields. "This is where Pa proposed to Ma," Eli said. "He told me the story once. Said he brought her up here at sunrise because he wanted her to see what she was getting into. The good and the bad, the beautiful and the hard." "What did she say?" "She said yes, just like you did." He turned to face her. "But I wanted to bring you here for another reason." "What reason?" "This is where I want to build. The new house. Our house." He gestured at the open land. "Big enough for a family. Close enough to the creek for a garden. Room for children to run and play." Josephine's breath caught. "Children. If you want them." His voice went uncertain. "If that's something you want. I know you lost your husband, and maybe you don't want to. I want them." The words came out fierce sudden. "I want everything. The house, the children, the life we're going to build together. I want all of it." Yeah. He pulled her into his arms, held her so tight she could barely breathe. But she didn't mind. She had spent too long breathing without him. Now she couldn't imagine doing it any other way. News came a month later that Luther Kane had been arrested. The territorial marshals found him at his ranch packing to flee. The evidence was overwhelming. Forged documents bribed officials, witnesses who finally found the courage to speak. He would face trial in Austin, and no amount of money would buy his way out. "What will happen to the ranch?" Josephine asked. "Sam's taking over," Della Mae reported, "trying to make amends for what his father did. He's already offered to share water rights with anyone who needs them." "That's unexpected." "People can change. Even people you think you know." Della Mae's eyes were knowing. "You taught him that. Same as you taught Eli." "I didn't teach anyone anything." You taught this whole valley what it looks like when someone stands up for what's right. That's a lesson worth learning. Summer faded into fall. The leaves on the cottonwood turned gold and drifted down to cover Captain's grave like a blanket. Josephine visited every week, laying wildflowers on the small mound, talking to the dog who had saved her husband's life. "You would like it here now," she told him one afternoon. "The barn's rebuilt. The creek's running full. Eli laughs sometimes. Actually laughs. You'd hardly recognize him." The wind rustled the golden leaves. Josephine smiled. "Thank you for taking care of him. All those years when he was alone, when he didn't think he deserved to be loved. You were there. You showed him that someone could stay." She stood, wiped her eyes, turned to go. Eli was waiting at the fence, watching her with an expression she couldn't read. "Talking to Captain. Someone has to keep him company. He would have liked you." Eli's voice was soft. "He didn't like most people, but he would have liked you." "How do you know?" "Because I like you." A small smile. "And Captain always trusted my judgment." That night, Eli made dinner. Beans that weren't burned, biscuits that rose properly. Josephine sat at the table and watched him work, marveling at the change. "You've been practicing." "Had to." He set the plate in front of her. "Can't have my wife doing all the cooking." "Your wife." She tested the words. They still felt new, still felt miraculous. "That's what you are." He sat across from her. "That's what you'll always be." They ate in comfortable silence. When the plates were empty, Eli reached across the table and took her hand. "I have something for you." "What?" He pulled a small box from his pocket, set it on the table between them. "Open it." Josephine's fingers trembled as she lifted the lid. Inside, nestled in faded velvet, was a ring. Gold, simple, worn smooth by years of wear. "It was my mother's." Eli's voice was rough. "Pa gave it to her the day they got married. She wore it every day of her life. When she died, I couldn't look at it. Put it away and tried to forget." "Eli, I want you to have it. I want you to wear it." He met her eyes. "I want everyone who sees it to know that you're loved, that you belong somewhere, that you're mine." Josephine lifted the ring from the box. It was warm, as if it had been waiting for her. "Will you put it on me?" His hands were shaking as he took the ring, shaking as he slid it onto her finger. It fit perfectly. "There." His voice cracked. "Now it's official." She looked at the ring on her finger. Simple gold, worn smooth by a lifetime of love. Her mother would have been appalled. Her society friends would have laughed. But here in this small kitchen, in this home she had helped build, it was the most beautiful thing she had ever seen. "I love you," she said. "I love you too." 3 words. The same 3 words that people had been saying to each other since the beginning of time. But hearing them from him in his rough voice with his mother's ring on her finger, they sounded brand new. They sounded like the beginning of everything. Winter came early that year. The first snow fell in November, blanketing the valley in white. Josephine stood at the window, watching the flakes drift down, feeling a peace she hadn't known she was capable of. Behind her, Eli was reading aloud from his mother's Bible. He did that now sometimes. Not because the nightmares were worse, but because the words brought him comfort. Brought them both comfort. "To everything there is a season," he read. "A time to be born and a time to die. A time to plant and a time to pluck up that which is planted." Josephine turned from the window, crossed to where he sat, lowered herself into his lap and wrapped her arms around his neck. "Keep reading. A time to weep and a time to laugh. A time to mourn and a time to dance." She rested her head against his chest, felt his voice rumble through her. A time to embrace and a time to refrain from embracing. A time to get and a time to lose. A time to keep and a time to cast away. "That's beautiful." Ma used to read it to me when I was small. Said it helped her remember that nothing lasts forever. Not the good times, not the bad times. Everything passes. Is that supposed to be comforting? I think so. I think she meant that you should hold on tight to the good things while you have them, because they won't last. Nothing does. He closed the Bible, set it aside. But that just makes them more precious, more worth fighting for. Is that what we are worth fighting for? You're worth dying for. His arms tightened around her. But I'd rather live for you instead. Outside, the snow continued to fall. Inside, the fire crackled in the stove, and the lamp threw warm shadows across the walls. Two people who had found each other against all odds, who had fought for each other when fighting seemed impossible, who had built something from nothing but hope and stubbornness and love. Josephine lifted her head, looked into the eyes of the man who had become her whole world. Eli. Yeah, I'm happy. The words seemed too small for what she felt, too simple, but they were true. Me too, Josie. He kissed her forehead. Me too. Spring arrived like a promise kept. The snow melted, the creek ran high and clear, and the land burst into color. Wildflowers carpeted the hillsides, purple sage, yellow columbine, the same flowers Eli had picked for her all those months ago. Josephine walked through the north pasture, her hand resting on her stomach. It was too early to be sure, too early to tell him. But she knew, the way women have always known. A child was coming, their child. She found Eli at the spot where they planned to build surveying stakes driven into the earth, measuring distances with his eyes. It's going to be beautiful, she said. He turned, smiled. That smile that had taken so long to appear that she would never tire of seeing. 4 bedrooms, maybe 5. Room to grow. Room for what? I don't know. He pulled her close. Whatever comes. Whatever comes. She thought about telling him now. Watching his face change, watching the news sink in, watching him become a father in his mind before he became one in truth. But there would be time for that, time for everything. They had earned it. I love you, she said instead. I know. He kissed her temple. I love you too. The sun climbed higher. The flowers opened their faces to the light, and somewhere in the distance, a mockingbird sang a song it had learned from the wind. Josephine leaned into her husband's arms and closed her eyes. She had come west looking for escape, looking for anything different from the life that had broken her. She had found hardship and drought and a man who wouldn't look at her face. She had found loss and fear and enemies who wanted to destroy everything she cared about. But she had also found courage she didn't know she had, a community that became family, a love that asked nothing and gave everything. She had found home, not a place, not a house, not even a piece of land. Home was Eli's arms around her in the morning. Home was wildflowers in a tin cup on the windowsill. Home was the sound of his voice reading scripture in the lamplight, the feel of his calloused hands holding hers, the certainty that no matter what came next, they would face it together. 2,000 miles from Boston. 2 years since she'd lost everything. And here she stood in a Texas pasture in the spring sunshine, more alive than she had ever been. Some stories end with wedding bells and white dresses. Some end with children's laughter and houses full of family. This story ends simpler than that. It ends with 2 people standing together in a field of wildflowers, looking toward a future they built with their own hands. It ends with a woman who refused to give up, and a man who finally learned to let himself be loved. It ends with the understanding that home isn't something you find. It's something you fight for. And Josephine Whitmore Thornton had fought for hers. She had won.